The roar of motorcycles shattered the morning silence as 6 leather-jacketed bikers rolled into a small, forgotten town on the edge of nowhere. Their engines echoed against shuttered windows and cracked sidewalks, sending a ripple of unease through the quiet streets. To the locals, men like these usually meant trouble. But today, fate had something else in store. Jake, the leader, tall, rough, and known for his short fuse, parked his Harley in front of an old convenience store. It was parched after hours of riding through the desert, so he waved his crew inside. As the door creaked open, the faint sound of a child's voice floated through the stale air. "Excuse me, sir, can we buy some milk?" Everyone turned. 2 kids, maybe 7 or 8 years old, stood by the counter. Their clothes were worn, their shoes too big. The boy held a few crumpled coins in his hand and the little girl clutched a small empty glass bottle. The store clerk, a tired-looking man, sighed. "That's not enough, son. Milk costs more than that." Boy nodded solemnly and whispered something that froze everyone in the store. "Please, sir, we'll pay you back when we grow up." Clerk frowned. "And how will you do that?" Before the boy could answer, the little girl spoke, her voice trembling but sure. "Because Mama said good people always pay their debts even if it takes a lifetime." Jake shifted uncomfortably. His crew fell silent. Something about that tiny voice cut through the noise of his world, louder than any engine ever could. The clerk sighed again, turning away. "Sorry, kids, I can't just give milk for free." Boy lowered his head, took his sister's hand, and quietly whispered, "It's okay, maybe next time." Before they could step out, Jake's deep voice filled the room. "Hold up," looked at him. He reached into his worn-out leather wallet and pulled out a $50 bill, more than enough for milk, bread, and a week's worth of groceries. "Give em the milk," he said gruffly, "and whatever else they need." Clerk hesitated, unsure if he'd heard right. The boy looked up, his eyes wide. "Sir, we'll pay you back, I promise." Jake knelt down so he could meet the boy's gaze. His rough, tattooed hands trembled slightly as he placed the money on the counter. "Kid," he said softly, "you already did." Boy blinked, confused. Jake stood up quickly, his throat tightening. He wasn't used to emotions not like this. His biker brothers watched in silence, some pretending to check their bikes just to hide the tears forming in their eyes. Outside, Jake lit a cigarette, his hands still shaking. Said one of the bikers, "You good?" Jake nodded slowly. "You ever wonder how kids like that survive?" Another shrugged. "Guess they just keep believing someone out there cares." That line hit Jake harder than he expected. He remembered his own childhood, a foster home that never felt like home, nights he'd gone hungry, and promises he'd made to himself that someday somehow he'd never let another kid feel forgot. He exhaled slowly, watching the smoke fade into the sunlight. Then without a word, he climbed back on his Harley and handed his wallet to one of his men. "Give the clerk whatever cash is left. Tell him it's for any kid who comes in hungry." The bikers rode away, dust swirling behind them. The little boy and his sister stepped out of the store, a small bag of groceries in hand. The boy noticed the fatting trail of motorcycles and whispered, "One day when we grow up, we'll find them and give it back." Little girl smiled through her missing front tooth. "Mama will be proud." Years later, in a town far away, a group of bikers stood in front of a brand new children's shelter. A woman in her 20s approached them, holding a framed photograph. "Are you Jake?" she asked softly. He nodded, older now, gray streaks in his beard. The woman smiled. "You don't remember me, but once you bought us milk." Jake froze, his heart pounding. She handed him the photo, a picture of 2 kids holding a sign that read, "Thank you, Biker Angels," welled in his eyes. "You built this place," she nodded. "With help, it's called the Rider's Hope. Every child who walks through those doors gets what we once prayed for, kindness." Jake tried to speak but couldn't. His crew stood beside him, wiping their eyes, pretending it was the dust. The girl smiled again. "Mama was right," she said softly. "Good people always pay their debts even if it takes a lifetime." Jake finally laughed through the tears. "Guess we got paid back after all." The rumble of motorcycles echoed once more, but this time it wasn't the sound of fear. It was a promise that kindness never dies, it just rides on. Moral: sometimes the smallest act of compassion leaves an echo that lasts a lifetime. What you give from the heart always finds its way back, often when you least expect it. 15 years had passed since that afternoon when 2 little kids had said those unforgettable words. "Pay for the milk, we'll return the money when we grow up." The dusty little town had changed. New stores, new roads, new people. But memories, they never faded. Jake now had silver streaks in his beard. The once fiery biker was calmer, his eyes softer. He had stopped leading wild rides years ago. Now he spent his mornings fixing old bikes for free at a small garage outside the city, a quiet corner he called Freedom's Rest. One cold morning, Jake was tightening a bolt when a young man entered, neatly dressed, around 24, polite but confident. "Sir, do you repair vintage bikes?" he asked. Jake looked up. "Sure, what's the trouble?" The young man smiled faintly. "It doesn't start anymore, kind of like its owner." Jake chuckled. "Bring her in, let's see what we can do." A few minutes later, as the man rolled in an old motorbike, Jake froze. The logo on the side, a faded Rider's Hope emblem, caught his attention. He'd seen it once before on a shelter signboard built years ago by 2 kids who'd once asked for milk. "Nice name," Jake said softly. Writer's hope, huh? The man nodded. It's my sister's idea. We named the shelter after someone she once met. Jake felt a familiar chill crawl up his spine. Someone she met. Yes, the young man replied. 2 bikers stopped at a store one day and changed our lives forever. Jake slowly set down his wrench. You were those kids. The man smiled warmly. You remember. Jake's throat tightened. I could never forget. Later that evening, the man's sister arrived. She was now in her 20s, graceful, confident, but her eyes still held that same innocence Jake had seen years ago. When she saw him, she paused, then smiled. You really haven't changed much. Jake laughed, shaking his head. Trust me, I've aged plenty. She handed him a small envelope. We came to return something. Inside was $50, old, folded carefully, and with a handwritten note that read, Debt of kindness repaid with all our hearts. Jake looked up, his eyes moist. You didn't need to. The young man spoke gently. We didn't do it because we had to. We did it because you taught us what kindness means. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The sound of the wind filled the silence, soft, peaceful, complete. Then the girl smiled. We're opening a second shelter in another town for kids who have no home. We'd love to name the bike garage beside it after you. Jake blinked, surprised. After me. Yes, she said, we'll call it Jake's Garage of Hope, because every story deserves someone who believed first. That night, Jake sat outside his garage staring at the stars. His crew had long since gone their own ways, some married, some gone too soon, but as he sat there, he felt something stir deep inside, peace. He thought about the 2 kids who once promised to pay him back. They had not with money, but with meaning. He whispered to himself, guess the ride was worth it after all. The next morning, Jake started his Harley one last time. The engine roared, steady and proud. He placed the same old leather wallet, the one that once held the $50 bill, on the workbench and smiled. A note was tucked inside, reading, If anyone needs help, pay it forward. And as the sun rose over the town, the sound of his motorcycle faded into the horizon, carrying with it a story that would live on wherever kindness dared to ride again.